Hello everybody, welcome to Politics Enhanced. Thank you all so much for clicking on today's video. And without further ado, folks, today we're going to do a hypothetical matchup between Gavin Newsom and JD Vance in 2028. Because folks, I've been reading your comments, and a lot of people are talking about how Gavin Newsom could be a potential frontrunner in the 2028 nomination for president. The Democrats have a lot of issues on their plate, and Democrats are looking for their star candidate, and a lot of people have pointed to Gavin Newsom being that change candidate, kind of like an Obama in 2008. And in this video, I want to dispel that myth and say why that's not true, and really why Gavin Newsom just is not electable. And before I start filling out the map, I want to talk about his unpopularity with Hispanic voters, because as you can see, Gavin Newsom's victory is shrinking. And what I mean by this is, if you look, this article written by The Independent talks about how Hispanic voters are shifting away from the Democrats. As you can see here, 62% of Latinos voted against the recall in 2021, but 53% of Latino men voted against it. So that's an 8-point slip of Latinos supporting Gavin Newsom back in 2018. And it gets worse, right? If we look at the 2021 recall election results, we see that about 7 million people said no to keep Gavin Newsom, and about 4.9 million said to remove him. Now, if you go to 2022, we see that the number of people who came out and supported Gavin Newsom severely diminished. And if you look at 2018, Newsom got heavy turnout. Now, to be fair, it was a blue wave year, but it's still important to note the fact that Gavin Newsom is losing support. He is not an electoral juggernaut. We can look here in 2022 and see that if you compare it to previous elections with Gavin Newsom on the ballot. So with that said, we're going to fill in all the safe Democrat states, and we're going to start with the West Coast. So obviously California, which has gone off the cliff, would be safe Democrat. You've got Hawaii, you have most of the eastern seaboard, but not all of it, including Connecticut and Vermont. And that is it for the safe Democrat states. So Gavin Newsom would have 100 electoral votes guaranteed in this election. However, the Republican JD Vance would have a bit of a different story, assuming that he is the 2028 nominee, and let's say that Donald Trump has a good term and he gets a lot of his promises and accomplishments done. Well, JD Vance would be in a very good spot to win the 2028 election. Typically, this isn't the case for presidents, but anyways, we're going to fill in the safe Republican states, and there would be a lot. So you have the Great Plains states, you have Texas. Obviously, that's going Republican, especially if Hispanics don't like Gavin Newsom. You've got the Deep South, Florida, South Carolina, Maine's 2nd Congressional District, and Alaska. And I'm going to also add the state of Nevada. And the reason why I'm going to add Nevada into the safe column is a ton of Californians have moved to Nevada because they hate the policies in California. In my opinion, a majority of the people who fled California and moved to other states like Texas, Arizona, Nevada would vote for JD Vance over Gavin Newsom, because Newsom is a big reason why people are fleeing the state. Over 500,000 people have left the state of California because of the policies of Gavin Newsom. And I'm not saying that these people would be straight Republican voters, but what I am saying is there's a good shot that they would vote for JD Vance over Gavin Newsom, which is the whole reason they left their home in the first place. So JD Vance would have 225 safe electoral votes coming out the gate. If you nuke these states, they would go Republican. And I was half tempted to throw in Arizona, but I didn't, and I'll explain why later in the video. But now we're going to fill in the likely Democrat states, which there are going to be quite a few. We have Washington, Oregon, Nevada, New York, and Illinois. Now, the West Coast, these two states up here, Washington and Oregon, they don't like Californians. They're not a fan of Gavin Newsom, and they probably still would vote for him, but it would be a little bit of weaker support, definitely under 10 points, probably would be about an 8 to 9 point win for Gavin Newsom. The same goes for Colorado and Illinois. These two states, although they've shifted heavily Democrat, especially Colorado, Illinois, which has shifted more Republican in recent years, would both vote for Gavin Newsom by under 10 points. You're looking at probably a 7 to 8 point win for Gavin Newsom in these two states. New York, same deal. I could see it being a 9 point win for Gavin Newsom, maybe a 10 point win, so I actually might move this back to being safe, but it's right on the border. You do have a lot of New Yorkers who also don't like Californians. Gavin Newsom, not being popular nationwide. I think California is the least favorite state for most Americans as it is. So I think they would have a very negative perception of Gavin Newsom to begin with, which obviously is not something that you want if you're trying to win the White House. So Gavin Newsom would have 77 likely electoral votes. And now you're looking at the map, it's starting to fill in. So next we're going to talk about the likely Republican states, and there are going to be quite a few. Arizona to begin with. Again, similar to Nevada, a lot of Californians have moved to Arizona. And some say that the state has shifted more Democrat, but if they're leaving California because of policies enacted by the people who control California, I think that would be an incentive for a state like Arizona to shift heavily Republican, even more Republican than 2024. If we look at the map, Donald Trump won it by 5. In 2028, with JD Vance running against Gavin Newsom, I could see Arizona being a 7 to 8 point win for JD Vance, especially the fact that Gavin Newsom is not popular with Hispanics and that Hispanics are trending more Republican. Arizona could absolutely shift to be a 7 to 8 point win for JD Vance. Next, we're going to go over to the Deep South. Georgia and North Carolina would both be likely Republican. These would probably be closer than Arizona, but I see North Carolina being a 6 point win and Georgia being a 5 point win for JD Vance respectively. These two states, again, they're southern states. They don't like Californians. They probably don't agree with Gavin Newsom's policy. All JD Vance would have to do is he would have to pull out maps of the crime rate and all the issues that come with California politics, and these two states would be ruby red. In addition to that, we also have the Rust Belt, and this is where the election would really be decided. And Vance is already sitting at 268 electoral votes, and this map isn't even done being filled in. But Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, yes, the Rust Belt trio would vote together, and they would vote straight Republican by 5 points. I think Wisconsin would probably be more conservative than Michigan or Pennsylvania, but as we can see in the 2024 election, Wisconsin was actually the most liberal of the Rust Belt trio, which surprised me. So in this scenario, you could say Wisconsin goes to Vance by 5 points, Michigan 5.5 or 6, but they would both be pretty close, and Pennsylvania could also be a 6 point win for JD Vance. And already he's at 312 electoral votes, the same amount of votes that his former boss got. But the reason why I say that is, number one, the Rust Belt votes together, and number two, the Rust Belt has shifted vastly Republican. It's been on this Republican shift since 2008. I don't see the shift stopping anytime soon, and therefore I think that these three states would be heavily Republican. They would shift very Republican. Now we're going to talk about the lean states. So I think the only lean state would be New Jersey. And the reason why I say this is, again, you look at 2024, New Jersey was within 6. Now, I know JD Vance isn't Donald Trump, and you have to take into consideration the electorate, the political environment, the popularity of both candidates, but I do think New Jersey is going to potentially be a future swing state. I'll make a video on why I think New Jersey is going to be a future swing state, but the shift is there. Also, if New York is shifting Republican, then the states around it, such as Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, all these states, this area here, would shift more Republican. So, although JD Vance wouldn't win the state of New Jersey outright, he would become much closer to winning that state's 14 electoral votes. I would say he probably would lose it by 3%. So now we're going to talk about the lean Republican states, and there would be a couple. Virginia would easily flip, and New Hampshire. Virginia is a state that used to be Republican. It shifted away during the Obama coalition. Trump almost won it back in 2024. And in 2028, if the Democrats decide to nominate Gavin Newsom, I think that would make for a very unpopular candidate. You would have a lot of subject matter to attack Democrats on. And I do see Virginia easily flipping for JD Vance by 2.5%. Now, it wouldn't be a landslide, but it would be close. But nevertheless, JD Vance, appealing to the establishmentarian group of the party, the government workers in the North, he could easily win the state of Virginia. Same goes with New Hampshire. Typically, they don't like incumbents, but I think Gavin Newsom would be so unpopular that Vance would probably just barely win it by over 2%. You could almost call this a tilt state, but I'm going to leave it as lean because I feel bold today. And that leaves us with Maine at large, Nebraska second, Minnesota, and New Mexico. These would be the closest states or electoral votes. And we're going to start with the state of New Mexico because, again, folks, Gavin Newsom is just not popular. He's not likable. Yes, he won twice in California because Democrats will vote for whoever the nominee is in California. There's no saving or changing California as of yet. But in New Mexico, you do have a heavy Hispanic working class population. You also have a white working class population, and that would only help JD Vance win the state. Now, New Hampshire still has a Democrat favorability, so I don't see it becoming a swing state for a very long time. But in this scenario, with Gavin Newsom and his California policies, Americans, especially people in New Mexico, would not want Gavin Newsom to become the next president. I think JD Vance would win it by probably 1% or less. The same goes for the state of Minnesota. I know I've said in the past that Minnesota is winnable for Republicans. I'm going to stand by that statement. It was close in 2024. Harris only won it by 4, and that was with the governor of Minnesota on the ballot. So the fact that Gavin Newsom is on the ballot and he's not a Minnesota Democrat, which actually is its own party. They're technically not the Democrat Party that you and I know. They're the Farmer Labor Democrat Party, which is actually different if you look at their website. But that's beside the point. Minnesota would be a flip for JD Vance. Again, he's also from the Rust Belt too, which would help him in the Twin Cities. You would need lower turnout, but I don't think people would be enthused for Gavin Newsom, especially against JD Vance and if the country is doing really well. I would also argue that Nebraska's 2nd congressional district would flip. It would be a less than a 2-point win for JD Vance and the Republicans. That leaves us with Maine at large, and I do believe that Gavin Newsom would barely hold on. It is the Northeast. You do have a lot of white working class voters. However, Maine at large is predominantly affluent and liberal, and typically those voters, the white affluent voters, typically lean Democrat. So I would see Gavin Newsom winning Maine at large, probably by a few thousand votes. It would be less than 0.5%. But in this scenario, JD Vance would absolutely win in a landslide, 345 electoral votes to Gavin Newsom's 193. I hope you enjoyed this content as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. And if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell down below so you don't miss another video. And until next time, Politics Enhanced out.